Continuing last week's discussion on the Great Commission, my view is that the Great Commission is the most important speech ever in the history of mankind. So, a couple of reasons for that. Without it, we don't have Christianity. That's the most obvious. A little recap. This is going to be a weekly thing on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. If you like it, give a thumbs up, share it, whatever you'd like to do. Continuing last week's discussion on the Great Commission, my view is that the Great Commission is the most important speech ever in the history of mankind. So, a couple of reasons for that. Without it, we don't have Christianity. That's the most obvious. Little recap from last week. For those of you who are watching, thank you. If you want to pick that up, check out 90 and Out Timothy Holt in the search bar on YouTube, and you'll find it. It'll come up. You can also do a search for The Great Commission, The Audience. And last week we talked about who were these 500 plus people who were firsthand accounts, and who's the greater audience? Short answer is, it's you. It's me. It's every single human being on the face of the planet. Today we're going to look at the location. In the words of a former boss that I had when discussing business, he said, location, location, location. It's all about location. And when it comes to the Great Commission, the speech really is dependent upon the Great Commission. It's about the location. So we're going to look at Bethany. Why did this speech take place in Bethany in Israel? And why on this hillside? Let's get right to it, shall we? You can find out Bethany was an area where Jesus spent quite a bit of time. There's 11 separate incidences recorded in the 4 gospel records that Jesus was in Bethany. One of them is a guy named Lazarus. He died. Jesus wept. And then he shocked everybody by bringing Lazarus back to life. Pretty big deal. That took place in Bethany. Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, lived in Bethany. A guy named Simon the Leper lived in Bethany. The place where Jesus gets his feet washed with some really expensive perfume by a shady lady, we'll just put it that way, takes place in Bethany. Jesus stayed in Bethany during Holy Week when he was done causing some uproar in Jerusalem. He was in Bethany, so it's kind of interesting. Also looking into Bethany, the name means inflicted. Okay, so sickly, infliction, or someone who is destitute, poor, impoverished, which is kind of interesting. So Bethany is a suburb of Jerusalem, which looks like my computer screen went quiet there, so we'll pull that up here in a moment. But Bethany was not the wealthy side of town. Hi, Michaela. Thanks for tuning in. Bethany was not the wealthy side of town. It was not the affluent area. Jesus predicated his public ministry on going to the poor, going to the lame, the blind, the sick. Anyone who society rejected, Jesus was there for, and he went to them. And Bethany is a perfect example of that. Bethany is the lower class area of Jerusalem. It's where all the sick people went. It's where the higher level people in society stayed away from. If it was modern day, it would be flyover country, okay? It would be where you never see the politicians because they wouldn't be shaking hands with those people. Bethany had homeless shelters and hospitals. There was not a lot of money in Bethany. So it's fitting, I think it's fitting that Jesus chose to give this speech, the Great Commission, where the wealthy people, the uppity people, the high society weren't going to be. So the other part of Bethany is it's about 1.5 miles from the Temple Mount. So there is that. So it's pretty close. But the big thing is about Bethany, it's where all the poor folk were. Okay? It was the slums. Okay? Also, but why a hillside outside Bethany? This is puzzling. And the answer is pretty simple. It's a natural amphitheater. Now, right there is a picture outside Bethany, if you can see that. Now, what would typically happen in an outdoor amphitheater, whoever's speaking would be on top, their voice would naturally carry, and everybody could hear them. Keep in mind, this is before microphones and amps, amplifiers, megaphones, things of that nature. So it was not uncommon, especially in antiquity, for public speeches to take place on hillsides. They created a natural echo chamber for voices to carry. Now, I also pulled up this, which is kind of interesting. Right there's the Mount of Olives. For those of you who aren't familiar with the biblical account of Jesus, the Mount of Olives is where the Garden of Gethsemane is. It's where all kinds of stuff takes place in Jewish antiquity. Jerusalem is right here. Bethany is about 1.5 miles away from Jerusalem, right there. And before the Great Commission, there's a road that goes from Jerusalem to Emmaus, which is this dotted line right there. I don't know if you can see my cursor very well in that picture, but Emmaus over here. And Jesus was walking with 2 of his disciples to Emmaus, and then when they got there, they were like, oh, hey, you should probably stay the night because it's getting pretty late out, and it's not a very nice road on the way back. There's Emmaus. So, little context, Bethany, Emmaus. Another good picture here is this one. I'm not sure how well you guys can see that. And quite frankly, if you guys know how I can actually pull that up on the screen on a live feed, that would be great. Let me know in the comments because I'm not sure exactly how to pull this up on the screen for you to see better. But Bethany's way down here, off to the bottom there. And Mount of Olives, the Temple Mount. You can see this winding road going through here, okay? And this hillside right here, not sure how well you can see that, but that hillside right there is where Jesus would have been speaking. So, why is that important? Why does it matter where this speech took place? Well, it's very simple. Every iconic speech in history, there's a reason for why it takes place where it takes place. Winston Churchill talking about to the Brits on combating Nazi Germany, and every trench, every hillside, every town, that iconic speech takes place in London during the Battle of London. If he would have been giving that same speech, but he would have been, say, in New York City, probably wouldn't have had the effect on Brits like it did. The I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King, if he would have given that speech in, say, Dallas, Texas, and not on the D.C. Mall in Washington, D.C., probably wouldn't have had the same impact. In the same way, Jesus giving this speech on a hillside in a natural amphitheater outside of Bethany, full of poor folk, it would not have most likely had the same impact on this group of 500 people as it did. If he would have been giving that same speech decked out in Louis Vuitton on his own network television show probably wouldn't have had the same speech. It's really hard to take someone serious about taking care of poor folk when they look like they're insanely wealthy. Just saying. So Jesus on this hillside gives this speech. In closing, I want us all to realize that this speech defines Christianity. In this speech, he tells his disciples, this group of 500 people, go into Jerusalem, go into the rest of Judea, go into Samaria, which is the Roman province next to Judea, and then go into all of the world and tell them the good news. Tell them the good news. What is the good news? The good news is people are horrible, terrible people that do really bad stuff. Wait, that's not the good news. That's bad news. We're all deserving of death. We're all deserving to be punished for the bad things we do. So what's the good news? The good news is Jesus is our Savior. He stands in our place. When it's time to pay the piper, Jesus says, it's all good. I already took care of it for you. All you got to do is believe me. All you got to do is follow me. Do what I did. That's it. So, hi, John. Thanks for tuning in. So, in closing, I want you guys to think about this. Without the Great Commission, there is no Christianity. You know, I've heard it said you can tell a lot about somebody by their last words. You can tell a lot about somebody's life by the last words they spoke. These are the last words recorded that Jesus spoke before he disappeared. And he says, all power is his in heaven. It's not for us to know the times and the dates that the Father, God, has set about. And then he tells them, go and preach the gospel. Go and tell the good news to everyone. Oh, and when you do, these really amazing, cool things are going to happen. Sick people are going to get healed. Demons are going to flee. You're going to drink some poison stuff and it's not going to hurt you. You're going to talk in some new languages. You're going to be able to pick up snakes. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? Our pastor. Our pastor is petrified of snakes. There is no way I'm going to probably see him pick up snakes. He would definitely like the Great Commission. Not going to do that. But in all seriousness, he says those things follow those who believe. But the middle of the speech is the key. And that is, those who believe are saved. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you're saved. That's it. It's that simple. It's not complicated. If either Jesus is who he said he is, or he's a raving lunatic, because he can't be both. Can't be both. And the second half of that statement, those who don't believe are condemned, is simply an observation. We are all condemned because we all do bad things and deserve to be punished for those bad things. So tune in next week, 8 o'clock on Sunday. I'm going to be looking at when this takes place, when this speech takes place, not just when in the Bible it takes place, but also when in human history it takes place. Circa 34 AD, what's going on with the Roman Empire, what's going on in Judea and Jerusalem at the time, the timeline concerning this speech, because that is also very important when looking at an iconic speech from history. For example, the Gettysburg Address. If the Gettysburg Address happened 2 years later, we probably would never hear about it in history class. But it happened at the commemoration of a federal cemetery at Gettysburg. Lots of people died in a 3-day period at Gettysburg. And because Abraham Lincoln was there at that cemetery at that moment in time giving that speech, it became iconic. And that's what we're going to look at next week, is the time frame in which the speech is given. Why did Jesus give the speech at this time? So thank you for watching. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. Leave a comment, share, whatever you'd like to do. Thank you, and may God richly bless you. Also, don't take my word for any of this. Clearly, you have access to the wide resource known as the internet and can look it up yourself. Thank you. Low network connection. What? Alright, I think I'm live, but I'm not certain because it does say live up in the corner, but it just gave me a notice saying it was recording due to a low network connection. So, I'm not going to try going live on YouTube. It did not work last week, and this week I just didn't get to it. So, I'm going to do the live show on Facebook and then port it over, maybe edit more over to YouTube later. So, excuse me, is the most important. So, sorry, I got something in my eye right there. I think it's an eyelash. But hey, details. So, hi Angela and Dorothy. It really is the Great Commission. Hi Byron. The name Bethany means